the way I used to look at it was we would have Joe, we'd have Pat, but my go-to man would be Colin O'Rourke, because he was the voice of from my perspective, he was the voice of reason in the panel. And I always felt that I could turn to Colin if the other two were starting to get out of hand or whatever. I remember actually one day turning to Colin. It was a championship match in Connacht, by the way, between Galway and Mayo. And I tried to deflect the two boys from the road that we're going down in. And I turned to Colin and asked his opinion. And he said, as far as I'm concerned, the referee is making a bollocks out of this match. So I discovered then that wasn't the right road to go. No. But yeah, that's live, so.
What do you do there?
What do you do then? Exactly, yeah.
The Maroon White Pod brought to you by CityLink. For bookings, timetables, updates and any other information, head to citylink.ie.
Welcome along to the Maroon White Pod. This week I'm delighted to be joined by former Sunday Game host Michael Lyster and Conán Doherty of the Irish Independent to look back on Galway's victory over Derry, which puts them in a fantastic position now. Michael, just coming to you first. Obviously, a lot of people know you from the Sunday Game. Just the one question for you. Do you miss it?
Do you know what? No, I don't. I mean, that's been asked of me a lot, obviously, over the last couple of years, And I feel, Paul, that I have to kind of clarify that when I say I don't miss it, in the sense that I had a fabulous time doing it. I couldn't have asked for better to be getting paid to go around the country covering matches and all that kind of crack, But like I was doing it for 35 years. I was doing the Sunday Game for 35 years. I was in RTE for 40 years. I did several championships and All Ireland on radio before I started on the Sunday Game. So, you have to say to yourself, you had a great time. And some things come to an end, and that's it, and that's fine, And I'm not out of the game either, in the sense that I'm still doing stuff related to GAA, like what we're doing now. And we have a podcast ourselves, as you probably know, Paul, The Game on Sunday with Martin Carney and Tomas Mulcahy and all that kind of stuff, So you're still doing stuff. And
Did you ever think you'd be doing a podcast after you finished?
Well, no, not really, in the sense that obviously down through the years, there weren't such things as this is kind of a relatively new phenomenon, like over the last couple of years and all that kind of stuff, So that was a new-ish adventure, if you like, But when the opportunity came, another Galway man, Paul Burns, who used to be the editor of the Sunday Game, and he put it in place and he asked me, would I like to get involved? And I said, of course, why not? And enjoying it. We were actually down a week or two ago, down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, doing a kind of a showcase with the podcast group at the Cork Limerick match, the hurling game. And jeepers, what an occasion to be at, because Cork's backs were to the wall. Lose that game, they were gone out of the championship. And it was just, the place was packed. Cork won it with a dramatic score in the last injury time. And so it's all good. It's all a bit of fun, as the championship, of course, should be, And I'm still enjoying it.
Conán, what are your memories from Michael hosting the Sunday Game?
I'm still searching for that fun that he's talking about with his championship so far as a Derry man. I can't find it yet, Michael. Honestly, I'm glad that we're just taking this detour on Michael's career, because I feel like way more comfortable and way happier talking about this, especially with a legend of the broadcasting world as well. But I think Michael's sort of he's sort of etched forever in GA folklore now, like genuinely, and I feel sort of embarrassed on your behalf, Michael, for saying that to your face, but like you are, like that's, like it was really at the peak as well of appointment TV, where you sat down and like this is where you got the big news. This is where you got all those famous arguments now that, if you had Joe Brawley on here now, you'd be asking him about this and that. And it was Michael keeping everybody in check, and it was Michael moving it along, and it was Michael that was also pulling stuff out of people as well in a really skillful way. So like it's hard to actually pinpoint one memory of him. It's every single one of those big things that you remember about the Sunday game when, in my opinion, doing a great job now, but the world has sort of moved on, like we talked about with podcasts and the digital world. But in my opinion, that was the peak for the Sunday game, and yeah, it was this man here that was fronting it.
Yeah, there were great times. There was no question about that. And you said it there yourself a second ago. Things move on, of course they do, as they should. But from my point of view, there was a period there, and this happened not just in Gaelic games, but it happened across the board, be it in the rugby coverage or the soccer coverage and all that. And you had the various panels, and in my opinion, we were all given a little bit more scope to talk and to explore, if you like, and maybe to argue. And yes, for sure, sometimes panelists stepped over the line, if you like. I think there's a little bit more. This is just my general view now of broadcasting. And it's not just about Ireland. It can be Sky TV or whatever the case is. There's a little bit more kind of oversee from management forces. You can't say this and you can't say that, and that kind of stuff. Whereas back in the day, there was a bit more freedom, let's say. And let's say you got away with up to a point, you got away with a little bit more from the point of view of what you could do and what you could say, and how far you could let panelists go. And we think about the days back when the Eamon Dunphys of this world and so on, and would come out and kind of outrage people, and as you said a moment ago, the Joe Brawleys and whatever, I think there's a little bit of that being lost. I can see reasons for it, but I think it would be nice if we could go back a little bit, to let people have more freedom to say their piece. And sometimes when they said their piece, it didn't suit everybody. God knows some of the things that were said down through the years, be it in Gaelic games or soccer or rugby or whatever the case is. Cripes, you'll be hauled over the coals during the week in RTE. Why the hell did you let him say that? But that was part of it. And as I said to you, like, I think we shouldn't throw that away. What people want to see when they watch sport on TV is the game. Let's say in GAA, the hurling or the football championships. Of course, that's what they want to see. But I always looked at it as the value added side of it. When you go to halftime or before the match or after the match or whatever the case is, can you bring something to the table that entertains people? And that's what we generally try to do. And that was part of the fun. And Bill O'Herlihy did that in the soccer and so on, and I think that's important. I think that's important to have that, because it gives a voice to people who are watching. They might not agree with you, they might argue, they might get incensed or whatever the case is, but as long as you're engaging with them, then you're doing some bit of business.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, because I used to complain whatever Joe said, not all the things he said, but I would get riled up. I'd write an article about it, I would tweet about it, and then when he got rid of him, it was like, no, I didn't mean that. I liked complaining about him. Like, that was the thing. Maybe I didn't even appreciate that at the time, but you must have a wry smile now, Michael, when you think. Sometimes I feel like we were sort of going after what Sky were doing with the analysis wall and the tactics boards and things like that and the stats. But they've actually gone the other way. Like they've completely pivoted and they've realized, like, we want to get people engaged. We want sound bites and more. And we want these things that we can cut up and put on social media and get people talking. And like they've gone completely after that now, whereas we've sort of followed them maybe too late.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a cutback in what they do, as you said, and for that very reason, that, like, the way that I look at it back through the years was, when we did Sunday games or whatever the case may be, it was left to us in the panel, to me as the presenter, and that to decide what the agenda was, and it was left to me to kind of decide how far I felt I could let our analysts go in what they were saying. Because what you wanted to do was you wanted to get honest opinions from them, and always informed. And they were very informed, by the way. You know, they weren't shooting from the hip. Be it Joe Brawley or Pat Spillane, they were well informed about what they were talking about, or Gerlach Nan and the hurling, let's say, and so on. And I never had any doubt about that. It was only then a case of how far can you let this go, because sometimes you would get maverick comments, and you made sure, like I always felt, don't insult anybody, don't insult players, don't insult referees and whatever. You know, make objective comments if you want to, for sure. If people get things right or people get things wrong, that's okay. Talk about that. But don't insult people for the sake of it. And we try to always get that balance going on it. And generally we did, you know. Okay, fine. Sometimes things might get out of hand. Of course they will. In any kind of heated debate, you know, you will get somebody to say something out of place. But I think most of the time we got it right.
Was it hard to split up Joe and Pat when they did have an argument?
It was the way I used to look at it was we would have Joe, we'd have Pat, but my go-to man would be Colin O'Rourke, because he was the voice of from my perspective, he was the voice of reason in the panel, and I always felt that I could turn to Colin if the other two were starting to get out of hand or whatever. I remember actually one day turning to Colin. It was a championship match in Connacht, by the way, between Galway and Mayo, and I tried to deflect the two boys from the road that we're going down in, and I turned to Colin and asked his opinion, and he said, "As far as I'm concerned, the referee is making a bollocks out of this match." So I discovered then that wasn't the right road to go. No. But yeah, that's live, you know. So
What do you do there?
what do you do then? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually, for the Irish Independent before the final last year, we got the three boys back together. We were only missing one person from the puzzle. I think it was the first time that they were together since 2019. Just to preview the All-Ireland final. But I think I always appreciated how tough your job must have been, Michael. But I really appreciated it then in that instance, because and actually exactly like you say, Joe and Pat were going off and they were having this argument. This is before Dublin v Kerry, and they were arguing about whether or not Shane McGuigan was a top 10 forward, and you know, and they were just going off on one. And then Colin O'Rourke, not me, Colin O'Rourke was the one who said, "Are we going to get back to talking about this final?"
I know. Yeah,
that's all I needed was his help.
100%. Yeah. But that was part of it. I mean, that was part of what it was all about, kind of. You know, that whole scenario.
So just on Galway, Derry, and Michael, just on, since you stepped down obviously from the Sunday game, have you been able to get to more Galway games now?
I have actually, yeah, because these days, like if I choose to go to matches, I was at the Galway Derry League match actually, not the one last weekend, and if I get an opportunity to go and see a game that I want to see, then that's my choice. Whereas obviously if you're presenting a program, you are obviously locked into the schedule and all that. The first year that I was away from the Sunday game, 2019, I was actually at the Galway Sligo game down in Marketplace Park, and the great thing about it was that, okay, Galway won it fairly comfortably, but the nice thing about it was 10 minutes from the end, when I knew the way this game was going, I was able to walk out of the stadium, walk up the road, and get into my car, and I was gone out of Sligo before the referee had blown the final whistle. And that's a luxury that I did not have for a long time, because, of course, you're presenting the programme, you're there until the end, and you're in every traffic jam in Ireland and blah, 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 and all that. I know those are small things, but at the same time, it's nice these days to be able to do, if you like, your own thing, kind of, from that point of view, to go to matches and choose to leave if you feel like it when you want to. The year before last, I was at the football final, and myself and a mate of mine that were at it together in Croke Park, we did exactly the same thing. 10 minutes from the end, we gave each other a kind of a poke on the shoulder and said, "Are we going for a pint?" And that was it. So yeah.
Conan, the post-mortem begins now for you. Just on Galway Derry, first of all, what did you make of the game at the weekend?
Yeah,
I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. From my perspective, okay, Galway, having come through a difficult league, from the point of view that obviously there have been a lot of injuries through the league campaign, and then they get into the Connacht Championship, and they've kind of, okay, they're getting a panel back together again, but at the same time they've been a bit lucky, if you will. A late goal against Sligo in the semi-final, then the dramatic winner against Mayo in the Connacht final, and then the win, obviously, against Derry. There's a bit of momentum going there. Damien Comer's injury the last day will be a concern, of course. But Galway are starting to get their panel back together again. And I'm sure Paul Joyce would be relieved with some of the guys who are coming back over the last couple of months into focus again. So, they're in a good enough place now in this group situation. They have two more big games to come against Westmeath and against Armagh. So we have to see how they play out, of course. And then you're only kind of halfway there, if you like. But yeah, they're in with a chance. Let's put it that way.
And Conan, what did you make of the game on Saturday? Sorry.
Yeah, to be honest, Michael's right there. Galway have been, it's almost like they're timing it really well. They didn't do it by design. They had a lot of injuries in the league, but they're starting to get players back at the right time, with obviously the caveat of Comer. I think it was before the Connacht final where a team sheet went out, with the bench and all included, and I was like, oh God, Galway haven't gone away, and this is the reality. I think it was just Cian D'Arcy that might have been missing from all the players that I would have thought, right, that's a serious team again. And obviously as a Derry man who has no experience of beating Galway, apart from that league game, which was I think it was a couple of mistakes from the referee to put Galway down to 13 men unjustly. So even after that match, it was like, I can't take much from it. But going into the game at the weekend, there's two ways to look at it. Genuinely, Galway are, and have always been for the last 3 years, a top 3-4 team. This is the thing. I know they were just trying to get by throughout the league. And I know they got sucker punched by Mayo last year, but they've won 3 Connachts in a row now. I always thought it was Dublin and Kerry, and Galway were the next team. And I was hoping Derry would maybe get themselves to alongside Galway, but they definitely haven't earned the right to say that, because A, Galway beat them all the time, but B, Galway just had way more success in recent years than Derry as well. They hammered them in League and Championship in 2022. They've just been punching at a higher weight division than Derry have been. So Derry still have a lot of proving to show that they're at that level. So you get tasked with Galway away from home in the Championship, and you look at it on one hand and think, okay, anybody could go down there and lose. Kerry or Dublin could get wiped out there in a Championship match in a group stage. That's just a really difficult game. And Derry went down, and one part of me would be thinking it's okay if you lose, but I think the manner in which they lost, and you said about post-mortem. I mean, after the Donegal game, I haven't like this is unfortunately what happens now when you get a bit of success. Like, all you can do is fall off, and then like everybody starts fighting with each other and stuff. Like the Derry community had been more united than it ever had been, and now like one little crack in the armor now, and everyone's bitching and moaning at each other, and they're all looking for reasons. Like I heard, example, they went away to Portugal for a training camp, first time they've ever gone abroad. And that's one of the reasons now, apparently, why they're not doing well. Like everybody's looking at something, like, and they go down to Galway and they've got injuries as well, which isn't going to help. But I just think the manner in which they, going down to 14 men and then, maybe throwing a bit of a point to try and get back into the game. Like they played all right, this is the thing, but because Galway were able to just cut through them, get the goal again, and just keep it a 5-6 point match, I think that has to eat away at their belief a little bit. I don't think they played too badly under the circumstances, but I just think now backing up from the Donegal match, they'll have to have a bit lower morale than they have had in this team's journey. So I'm a bit worried now just on the aftermath of it, like what damage that's going to do.
But I think that has to be put, I believe, into the equation here is, okay, the sending off in Salthill was significant, of course, in the game. And we can't rule that out of the scenario. But I'm just wondering if this Derry team are not getting a little bit tired at the wrong time of the season. Between club championship and the players involved in that, and then going to the county game and all that kind of stuff, there seems to be, you kind of alluded to it there, there seems to be a kind of a lack of spark at the moment from a situation where you would thought they were going to be driving on.
Yeah.
At the moment, that doesn't seem to be the case.
There's definitely, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Conán, do you think the Glen boys were rushed back too quickly?
But see, yeah, so I think I would normally get quite defensive at what Michael said, but I sort of am coming around to his way of thinking. So, because last year, the Glen boys, they played a club final as well, and they were down in Cork within a week. They were in Division 2 though, and they weren't as big a hitter, a big player. So I just don't think and they didn't win. Glen didn't win either, so maybe they weren't out drinking as much as they were when they went to Kerry for the start of this match, but it just wasn't as high a profile an incident. But we can't, like, so my point is, like, things have happened exactly the same, that they went hard for the league last year, albeit it was Division 2, and they went hard for the league this year. The Glen boys were there, but they have more injuries this year. And another thing that maybe has gone under the radar a little bit, I know Rory Gallagher's no longer their manager, but Peter Hughes was also their strength and conditioning coach, and they were very good at whatever he was doing. They had no real injuries. Like, and this year now we're seeing a lot of injuries. You're going to Galway with 3 halfbacks missing, and then Gareth McKinless gets sent off. And then like we talked about, Niall Loughlin's not there either, and even Niall Loughlin's like a superhuman. It's just whatever about him. He's just an elite athlete, and these boys now are starting to, yeah, maybe it is fatigue. Maybe Michael's onto something there. Maybe they should have, gone through the ups and downs of this long season. Even though it was condensed, it's a long season because, like we talked about, if you get through this group stage, it's still only halfway. But they really had to hit this hard because they were lucky that they didn't get drawn in with Dublin or Kerry. But the only way to sort of cash in on that luck is to top that group then, because now the chances are that Derry go through. They have the preliminary game a week after the group stage, and then a week after that they have a quarter-final match, and then they'll be playing one of the group winners, which, the maths are they're not going to get Galway because they can't. So the maths are it'll be Dublin or Kerry or Donegal. Like, that's the 3 options that they have, and it seems like too big a task now for Derry to go from this Galway match, topping the group and going the whole way. I can't see it.
Just before we do get into a couple of talking points of the game, Gareth McKinless's red card on Damien Comer, obviously there's no complaints there what he did. It was disgusting, really, that stamp. But not to have a go here at McKinless, more so what he did in that moment. For me, I don't think 2 games is enough of a ban here. I think really that McKinless, for what he did, for what he stamped, for young people looking on, that he should miss the rest of the season. Do you agree with me there, or how do you see it?
I don't disagree with you. But at the same time, I think sometimes things happen in matches in the spur of the moment. And sometimes you have to take into account the player themselves. I have no doubt sometimes players look back after they've done something stupid and costly and think to themselves, why the hell did I do that? But at the heat of battle, sometimes you do stuff. He shouldn't have done what he did. Of course, we're not trying to defend it or anything like that. But you have to kind of put something else into the pot, if you like, and say to yourself, like, do you do things sometimes in a match? You turn around. Who hasn't done this? I've done it myself. Turned around and hit a fella, and then you think to yourself, that was kind of stupid, But yeah, these things happen, they happen. And what you're asking there is, how heavy should the penalty be? That's another story. You get a penalty, and you're out for a couple of games, and so on. But yeah, stuff happens.
How do you see it going?
Like exactly what you said there. Like there's no defending it. It was very disappointing on many levels, and not especially, but definitely from a Derry point of view as well, because of what it did and how unnecessary it was as well. We got no advantage from that. As Michael says, yeah, you're obviously Comer was obviously being targeted. I would say like he's hurt Derry in the past before. He's obviously the main man. You saw McFall hitting him with a shoulder. You saw Chrissy McKay giving him a push over the line after the ball had gone away. And Comer very cleverly, getting McFall the yellow card in. Like you're just wondering, McFall's obviously told to keep an eye on him, get stuck into him. But like, what are you doing that off the ball for? But we all do it, and we're all told to do it. And then McKinless, like I was going to say, gets the opportunity. I mean, that's just far too kind. Like it's giving away the free, and you stand on somebody, and for it, you're off, and your team's definitely losing this match. It's yeah, and like you say, there's so many people watching on. It's nothing you can condone. Obviously, it's very disappointing. That's the only way I can put it, really. And for me as well, it definitely just ruined the match.
It just felt terrible as a Galway fan because we've all know Damien Comer has had such ankle trouble.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because do you remember Gareth McKinless tackled Sean Kelly down the end line? Did really well, and they both went
Yeah.
over the end line. I was shocked that nothing else came from that. I thought there'd be a bit of something, like, give him a shoulder, hold on to his jersey, I just thought there'd be a bit of roaring or something. There was nothing. And part of me was thinking, okay, we've got like a mellow Gareth McKinless here today. How wrong was I? I mean, like a few minutes later, he's walking across somebody's leg. You have to say as well, it was a good spot from the linesman because
Yeah, brilliant.
it wasn't a classic like what we've seen before, somebody stamping down on someone, but it was definitely a stamp, which you can't obviously dress up in any other way. But it would have been easy for the linesman, and we've seen this before too. Of just like, I'm not too sure what happened. I can't call it exactly how he saw it, but he nailed it. He really did, and yeah, the punishment was deserved.
The last
I
thing
mean,
was
what happened there, Paul, was that's in the spur of the moment in a match. I suppose if you equate that, if you like, or if you put that in comparison to the end of the Clare Waterford match and all the shenanigans that went on after that, I would be more worried about that kind of scenario.
Yeah.
With management confronting officials, referee, linesmen, and so forth. That's a far worse image for Gaelic games than McKinless just losing his head for 10 seconds. And I think that has a bigger implication going forward, if you like, for Gaelic games about that kind of stuff at the end of a match. Officials, referees, linesmen, whatever the case may be, should not be put in a situation of confrontation with managers or anybody else, and all that kind of pushing and shoving and confrontation and so on. We've got to be careful about these kind of things in Gaelic games. We know we're all passionate about it and so on, but there are lines in the sand and they're being crossed at the moment. And that's not good for Gaelic games going forward.
We just don't really want to see Derry appeal this and it be less than 2 games.
Oh, like
you can't say that, because they're entitled to appeal it if they want to, and that's up then to the Games Administration Committee to decide what they're going to do about it, But that's a different thing. That's
just with what we've seen with appeals, sometimes suspensions in the GA have a tendency to be less than what they're supposed to be, really.
Well, yeah, maybe that might have been the case going back a little bit in time, where sometimes you got appeals, or you got you got suspensions of a month, which ran out the Saturday evening before the next game, kind of, which was a complete farce. That's not quite the way it is at the moment. There's a little bit more cognizance of imposing a proper penalty for something, but that's all a bit of a tricky one, generally, in terms of how much is a suspension, how much punishment should you get for discretions and so on in games. I don't have the answer to that, by the way, but just that's the way it is.
Do you see Derry appealing it, Conán?
No, to be honest, I'd be shocked. Like, what would you be appealing, really? Like, it wouldn't. You'd have to be looking at some sort of technicality, that the referee wrote something that, but like, why would you be doing that as well? Like, you'd said here, like, you don't think a 2-game ban is harsh enough. So, like, why would you not just take that medicine for something that everybody agrees that they shouldn't have done within the county as well? So, yeah, like the only other scenario I could see is potentially them trying to make an example out of it, like you had said, Paul, and maybe they'll try and give him a harsher punishment. Then they might appeal and say, look, there's no precedent here. Here's a pile of other examples and things like that. But yeah, I can't see them appealing it anyway. Although you can use these words and cut them up.
Yeah, and I don't think, by the way, anybody's going to make an example out of anybody here. It was what it was. There was a penalty imposed.
Yeah,
and I think that should be it, as you said. And I think Derry should leave it so.
Just going back to the game in the first half, so much Conán are made of short kickouts in the GA, but I'm getting excited watching this long Galway kickout.
It's so like it's so dangerous. Like they're so good at it, and it makes it so easy for Gleeson, because he's got a big kick and he can put it down on top of these big men who are hungry as well. It's not just that they'll get up and win it. It's not just they're set up well, and they are, and they're both of those things, but they're really hungry and they'll fight for it and they'll scrap for it and they'll win dirty ball. There's a wing back from Slaughtneil. He used to play with Derry, Pádraig Kelly, he called him. His nickname was Togger. I remember playing him this rainy Friday night down in the side of the mountain against Slaughtneil, and I had the misfortune of playing wing forward, and he just cleaned me out. Like, he scored a couple of points and everything. He won every ball. None of us really touched the ball. And I remember afterwards saying to him, like, what is it you're doing? You're very smart with the kickouts. You're winning a lot of breaks. And he sort of looked at me like, what is this boy talking about? He said, well, when the ball broke, I just tried to win it ahead of you, and I did. And sometimes, like, I'm very guilty of, like, over analyzing things, and he saw a ball and he went for it harder than me, and he went for it with more gusto, and probably over years and years of doing that he's well able to do it. And this is like the Galway boys, like, and Derry obviously, have not a weakness, but they were caught out against Donegal by pushing up so aggressively, and when you hit that ball up there, it spooks them out. I mean, I don't know why they were bringing Owen Lynch out again. I mean, Galway weren't afraid of the keeper being out. They still hit it on top of him. They still hit it high and long, and he had a scamper back then, and that's actually leaving a space free then, because he's still worried about his nets, well, more so than he should have been against Donegal. So he's flying back, and then this space that the Derry players thought was occupied is no longer occupied as well. So, but like, it's not the only game, in fairness, that I've seen Galway do really well in the middle of the pitch, and it's such a weapon for them.
But I think there's also a point to be made, be it in Gaelic games or in hurling or whatever. You would think it's a simple philosophy. Get the ball as far as you can away from your own goal. Or be it soccer or whatever you want to call it. Then let fellas fight for it up the other side of the field rather than 40 yards out from your own goal.
Yeah, they're getting such joy off it this year too, Galway.
Well,
100%.
they are. But then, as I said, um, a long ball, it can't be wrong. It mightn't always be right, but it can't be wrong. If it crosses the halfway line, then it's up to other fellas to go and win it. I'd love to be telling guys in the past, from a Galway point of view, the Sean Purcells or the Frank Stockwells. I'm old enough to remember these guys. To be telling them, do you know what? You just kind of wander around the field there, and eventually, after about 20 minutes, we might actually get the ball up to you. Get out of here. They wanted the ball.
Yeah.
They wanted it in their hands, and nobody better like a Sean Purcell, a big, strong centre forward. Just give me the ball, and we'll do the rest.
I remember doing stats on a few games. Like, so if you do need the numbers to back it up, which I know a lot of people do, but they are there as well. Like, when you kick the ball long, you're more likely to score from that, and that's including all the balls that you lose from kicking it long. But not only that, you're less likely to concede by kicking it long because, as Michael says, the ball's up the pitch and you can defend with it up there. Whereas if you're going short, it's way harder to score because you have to work it past 15 players. It takes longer. You're coming from further away. And you're way more likely to concede. Like, you're way more likely to concede yourself because you're trying to work it past all these players. Or in Derry's case, you just want the one kick that goes wrong, bang, you're in for a goal. Like,
Yeah.
we see it so often. And like, one game that I really remember doing the stats on was the All Ireland final between Tyrone and Mayo, and like, they just went long all the time, and they didn't win. I don't even know if they won over half of their long kickouts, but they scored 1-3 directly from those kickouts. Like, it was almost a winning of the game for them against Mayo.
Particularly with the physical players Galway have across the middle too,
Yeah.
Conán.
100%. Like, this is it. I mean, like, why wouldn't you? Like, I often find, especially if you look at it from our own point of view, with Glass, other teams are trying to keep the ball away from him, and like, you can apply that to any of these big men that you're talking about, or any big midfielders. Why would we be afraid to hit the ball towards him then? Like, people are afraid of him challenging for the ball, so why would we not try and use that when we've got our own kickouts? And it's the same with Galway. I mean, Derry do not want Galway hitting the ball into these men because they're well able to win it, and when they win it, guess what? They're in the middle of the pitch. they've got over most of your players.
It was 4-4 on 17 minutes before McKinless gets sent off. McKinless then gets sent off on the 21st minute. Galway go in 8-6 ahead. Michael, Matthew Tierney's really struggled with injury this year, but he came back in the last two games particularly, and even under that kick out, he looked really impressive. But there was always a lot of arguments, where's Matthew Tierney's best position, but he's a player who's really starting to come of age now.
Well, he is, yeah. And I suppose since he came through the scene from underage, obviously, he's been one to watch because of his talents, of course. But the other thing about it is, be it a Matthew Tierney or Damien Comer or whoever the case may be, or Walsh, a team is a team. It's not a collection of individuals, and you need guys all around the pitch. The Galway team that won the All Ireland, two All Irelands, the 1998 All Ireland and again in 2001. Some of those players on that team, they weren't the greatest footballers in Galway, but they were the best team coming out of Galway. And it's a balancing act between all of those factors. You need your clever players, your star players, your Michael Donlans, your Pádraig Joyces of the time. You also need the other guys who can do the hard graft and the hard work around the pitch. And you can also apply that, if you go back as well far enough, to the Meath team under Sean Boylan that won All Irelands back in the late 80s and early 90s. And that some of them, again, they weren't the best footballers in Meath, but they were certainly some of the toughest men in Meath. And you put the combinations together, and you get yourself a team. And a team is what's going to win you matches, not an individual.
Just before we get into Galway, how they got the 2 goals, because there were 2 great moves coming. Where do you see Galway in the conversation now?
From my point of view,
yeah.
Sorry to cut across you. Look, they're in as a chance. They haven't got magically so much better, apart from getting the lads back from injury and so on, and getting the squad looking a bit more. I'm not sure going forward where Damien is going to be at. Hopefully, it's not a serious injury.
There's Rob and Sean with that too.
Huh?
There's Robert Finnerty too and Sean Kelly. They had to be. Those were both injuries, but I don't think they're serious. Anyways.
I know you'll get bangs and wallops in matches, of course you will. But I think they're in with a chance. But how good that chance is, we have to wait and see. There's a lot of games to go yet. There's 2 more games to go in group section before you go anywhere else in the competition. So I defy anybody to tell me now, like, exactly how any of these groups are going to work out, and who's going to come through. Well, we can sort of guess, if you like. Kerry is going to come through, or Dublin is going to come through, probably. But outside of that, where are things going to be at? We have to wait and see. But also, we have to go back to this condensed season, and this is taking its toll in terms of the knocks that you mentioned a second ago there. And lads, they don't have enough time to recover from some of these injuries, because there's a game the following weekend, and probably a game the weekend after that. So that's a big factor in the whole thing, and that's an issue for counties who's got good panels. We know Dublin have a good panel. We know Kerry have a fairly good panel, but once you get into injuries, you're now depleting your panel. And that causes its own problems.
And where do you see them in the conversation at the minute, Conán?
Like what I said at the start, like I genuinely mean, like they've always been just below Dublin and Kerry for me, like the next best team, like the best contenders, really. I think then you've everybody else sort of scrapping for air, like maybe the best of Ulster and Mayo you can put into that bracket, but I do think they're just behind Galway. Like I love the makeup of their team. They just have so many different options. Like from the midfield, they're defending. Like the reason they're so good against Ulster teams and Derry in particular is they're so good at defending, which is ironic, but it means that they can it means that they can stop that counter attack. It means that they can stop those little when Derry bring 15 men forward, but Galway are well able man on man to just sort of watch their men. They're smart enough to cut off all these lanes that these teams are looking for. And they can counter attack. They can hit it in first time. Michael Murphy says something on commentary as well about they went back and forward 4 times, maybe side to side. And he said other teams, when that happens, they panic because they feel like they should be doing something now by this stage. But he said Galway don't. They just keep going through the moves, and they keep waiting for the right option to appear. And it always does for them. And I think it's because they have so many options that can actually do something for you. Then if that's McDade coming from midfield, if it's Conroy, and then if it's going into Comer, Walsh, Finner, like there's just so many weapons. Like, I'm honestly sick to the back teeth of Galway. Like every time I think of having to play Galway, I just find it almost an impossible task. So they're right in the conversation. Like it's boring. I think Dublin are still the ones that you have to wipe out. I think Galway can beat Kerry. It's whether or not they can beat Dublin, but they've given themselves a good chance now in this, what people call the group of death. Like they're favourite now to go on and win this group and then go straight through to the quarter-final, and they won't have to worry about Dublin or Kerry until the semis at least, even if then. So like they're in good shape as long as they don't lose to Armagh, which from a Derry point of view, we really need them to lose to Armagh so we can all hopefully finish on 4 points and then try and bring it down to score difference. That's what we like to do up in Ulster, just drag you down to some sort of dogfight in the mud there. But yeah, like the only thing I would say maybe to beat a Dublin is, do you remember the 2022 run they had? And like they were brilliant. They were so good. It always felt to me that one of those 3 inside forwards, they were all taking turns. Like they all had a great season, but it was like, Comer in one game, and then it was Finnerty in another game, and then it was Shane Walsh in another game. And I was thinking, if they can get a game where the 2 of them are lighting it up, or 3, but if they can get a couple of them lighting it up in the one match, like I can't see anybody beating them then. But maybe it's just the way they play, and then they feed whoever's working that day. But I just think if Galway get everybody ticking at the right time, and that can happen. Like it almost happened for Derry against Kerry last year. They just got it right. It all came together. They weren't good last season, really, after Gallagher went, and it just came together, and they were maybe unlucky. And if Galway got that, then I think they could beat anybody.
There was certainly patches where Finnerty, Comer and Walsh were good together, Conan, on Saturday.
Oh, definitely. Like, yeah, definitely. So it's probably not the best game to come off the back and say. Walsh is maybe a bit more peripheral, and then obviously Comer then was sort of coming in and out. Like I think it was Finnerty's day. If I look back in the championship now, I'll say Finnerty was really good there against Derry. But that's the thing as well. I mean, he's so good, and he really benefits of always being marked by the third best cornerback or the third best fullback on the team, because everybody feels like they have to focus on Walsh and they have to focus on Comer, and then this guy's inside just clipping over. Like it seemed like he put one over from the byline there at one stage. Like he'll work with any angle you give him. He's so nonchalant, isn't he? He never seems like he's really doing a 10 out of 10 effort, but he's just swinging the ball over so easily. He doesn't feel like he needs to sprint or he needs to take boys on. He'll just find space and put it over, and it's so deadly.
Michael, a question here for you. Before the inter-county season started, I had Kieran Murphy from Second Captains on the podcast, and we were talking about, is Paul Conroy one of the greatest footballers to play with Galway when you consider his longevity, coming back from that broken leg, obviously, and then you see him get man of the match against Derry. Like, this man is something else.
Do you know what it is? 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said to you, we were talking about the Galway team, Paul Conroy is a spent force. He's been there, done that, great career at his age at the moment, and the injury, as you said. And then guess what? He goes out the last day and he's named as the most influential player on the pitch, which is a huge compliment to his ability, his determination, his doggedness, if you like. And jeepers, I mean, I would say to you at the moment, if you ticked all the boxes, you would say technically he's not the player going forward, but at the moment he's still a very, very important part of that Galway team. And it's the influence. I said this to you a moment ago about what makes a team. It's about people who show leadership, people who go out on the pitch and who can put in a performance that inspires those around them, that maybe don't have the same, they might have more skill, but they don't necessarily have that level of mentality about it. Conroy has never lacked that. From the first day that I saw him as a minor, which is a long time ago, he's always had that, and he's continued that through thick and thin, through ups and downs and so forth, and he's still there, and he's still an important part of that Galway team.
It's just his longevity for me that stands out. It's remarkable at this stage.
Well, that's the whole point. Yeah, it is, but it's not just longevity. I mean, you don't get any medals for just showing up for the game, kind of. You still have a important part to play for it. Let's put it this way: Pádraig Joyce and his selectors wouldn't be putting him on the pitch if you didn't think he was getting value from Paul Conroy. He is getting it, and there you go.
Was the most impressive thing about Galway for you, Conan, on Saturday night the way they worked the 2 goals? The press was really good for the first goal, where Sean Kelly eventually gets it in. Conor Gleeson saves it, and Galway counter-attack. A great move linked together by Cian Darcy and Daniel O'Flaherty, and Darcy punches it to an empty net. Were those kind of the most impressive things about Galway on Saturday?
Yeah, I think that second goal in particular, it sort of summed up how Galway opened up Derry in the second half. Like they were just starting to cut through them, and they were finding space, and Derry were getting tired, and Derry were a bit shapeless actually as well, and they were a bit rushed and panicky, and it didn't help that it was in the first half they hit 5 into the keeper's hands, which is, physically
Yeah.
draining anyway, but it's obviously mentally tiring, and they were hitting wide, and then they were being turned over in the second half. Obviously the one down the right wing where McGuigan turns out, and was it McHugh or somebody came into him and just hits him with his chest, and McGuigan falls over, and the crowd love it. It's underneath the stand, and they break down the pitch and score, and they were just doing stuff like that the whole second half, it seems. So that second goal sort of summed it up and maybe capped off the way they were able to just cut through Derry and counter attack them at that stage. I think it's hard for me to not see it through a Derry lens, especially the first goal, where they come out in the second half and they're you're thinking you're going to be up against it, but then their leaders are standing up, and McGuigan scores, and Glass hits his lovely one, coming on the loop and out in the wing, and they get level. And McGuigan has this big block down, underneath the posts, and you're thinking, okay, they're really going to dig in here, and then the keeper just kicks it straight to the Galway hands, and they work it well and they punish it ruthlessly. But I just think from a Derry point of view, if they're doing the analysis, they're just like, that's so avoidable. Just don't do that and you'll be fine. And like that's going to happen though. Like we talked about when you're playing that game, like Lynch was brilliant against Dublin in the league final. He got all those kicks off, and they were so tight. They were under so much pressure. And the thing about it as well is that he was kicking them all into players' face, so they're on the run and they were catching it, and they weren't down to their feet and bending over or being pushed over or hitting it on the ground. It was just he had the courage to lift it up. But then I think that's the drawback of it then, because he's sort of kicking through it, like he's trying to hit it at the top of his laces so he can lift it up. But then when he does that and he pulls it straight to a Galway jersey, they completely ate it alive then. And like the second goal, like I already talked about, but just the fact that there was 3 in it, high ball and amazing catch, on another day, it's like that's such a big moment in the championship, such a big turnaround for Derry. McGuigan gets up, takes it from the sky, turns and buries it. But from a Galway point of view, Gleeson saves it. Galway go up, and again, it's ruthless and it's just merciless. And Galway end the game then with a goal of their own. So it just goes from what could have been all square to 6 points within what 20 seconds.
There were certainly elements of the second half, Conan, where I know obviously we'll talk about that goal chance where Gleeson saves it and it looks like Derry are kind of coming back into it, but it kind of did feel like Galway had a certain element of control in that second half.
Like they definitely did. Like I say, they're defending so well, and they were making Derry panic. Now the thing again from a Derry point of view, because of some of the injuries, which I don't use an excuse, I think then the main culprit for not winning this match is Derry going down to 14 men, and it's also Galway being really good and being good at home. But Derry having those injuries meant that Rodgers and McFall come back to the halfback line. So the halfback line looks fine, but you've taken Rodgers out of midfield, and now Emmett Bradley, who's getting on, but he's a great impact sub for Derry coming into the forward line, but he's now playing 70 minutes in midfield away to Galway and against that big midfield unit that we're talking about. And then Niall Loughlin's not there in the forward line. McFall's not there in the forward line. I don't feel like Declan Cassidy really gives them that drive up top that McFall would have. And then because Niall Loughlin's not playing, Toner starts. And I think there's a player that most people wouldn't know, but Cormac Murphy had done really well in the league for Derry. He would have started, I think, because Toner has been one of their most influential players this year coming off the bench. Like he was so important against Mayo, came off and scored 2 points when Mayo had come from 10 points down to 2 points, and Toner came on and ticked it over, and in the league final as well. But because he started and then he's doing that big shift and he's just disappearing into one of these players that are going up and down the pitch, and we just didn't get any attacking influence out of them then. And like so we didn't have anything coming off the bench, and our attack then just didn't it definitely tired. It didn't look as sharp. And like to be honest, like they also panicked then as well, and Galway defended it well. Galway cut off the usual sort of angles and stuff that Derry would like to cut through. They got a couple of easy scores in the first half, but like Galway eventually got the measure of them. And I think that's just how the game then panned out, where it became much harder for Derry and it became much easier for Galway.
Michael, someone you've known since a young age, coming from your own parish is Port Joyce. He's been involved now in the inter-county game for quite a while. What are your biggest memories of just knowing Port?
Well, I think I would go back a little bit before that to Porrick's uncle Billy, who was the first player from our parish, from Killereardon, to get on the Galway team. back in the 70s and early 80s, and that was a huge thing for the parish to get a player on the Galway team. And then along comes Porrick, the next generation after that, if you like. And it was so obvious from very early on that guys like Porrick, like Michael Donlan, whose mother is also from Killererden, Fidelma, and players like that, right place, right time, young talented players coming through at the right time, and then of course with the manager like John O'Mahony, with the smarts to put all these guys together to see the potential in them and to bring them forward in terms of their abilities. But whatever happens with Galway, whether they win an All-Ireland or they don't win an All-Ireland, Porrick Joyce is a legend in Galway. There's no question about that. That's not going to change. It's as simple as that. He'll be a bigger legend if they do win the All-Ireland, by the way, obviously. But what a fabulous player. And what a great family the Joyces have been for Killererden GEA. Paddy, Porrick's dad, late dad, etc., and the rest of the family. Kind of people that you want in your parish, who are the backbone of the parish, essentially.
Would you have seen Porrick when he was a kid playing football?
Oh, sure, of course. Where I come from in Barnajarrag, the GAA pitch is across the road. So yeah. you would see them all. You'd see them all as kids, kind of, and coming through the. In actual fact, it's like anything else. Back in those days, Killererden is a small parish, but in those days, you would see a lot of talented players, a lot of potentially talented players, who don't necessarily drive on and get to the next level, But then you get the X factor with people like Porrick and one or two others at that time. There was a guy before that again, back in Billy's time, Morgan Hughes, who was a fabulous footballer. I'm going back to the early 70s here now, another Killererden man. And but then, you don't know. You might have all the talent in the world, and then maybe one or two small things kind of go against you and don't quite work out for you and so on. But that's sport, there is no clear logic to any of that, you have to have, as I said a moment ago, that X factor about you. The ability, yes, but that other factor that gets you just that other few yards down the road.
Conan, so we were just referenced, Michael had referenced it already, injuries. There's going to be, I'd say, a lot of people going to Mass in the next few weeks to hope that Damien Comer's injury isn't too serious given the struggles he had. But this is key now for Galway, that we can just keep everyone on the pitch.
Yeah, but it's key for everyone. I always I never like when people would say that about teams. I hear with Derry as well. Shane McGuigan gets injured, then you're going to have a trouble. If Lionel Messi gets injured, Argentina don't win a World Cup. That's reality. You have these players, you want them there for the big occasion, and you need to look and a bit of fortune and mind in them to come together. If David Clifford gets injured, Tyrone beat Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final. There's all these things, so we do need your players there. You do need Damien Comer, sorry to tell you, but that's not as much as the reliance that Derry have on maybe McGuigan. But to win an All-Ireland, you're going to need them. Maybe Dublin are better than most have been able to cope with this sort of thing. They're probably the only team who could do without any of their players that they have. And the sick thing about Dublin, not to take us off on a detour, but I'm coaching here with Skerry's Harps, my adopted club, and there's 4 players on the Dublin panel, and Killian McGuinness is playing now at the minute, and he's doing really well. His dad's a Derry man. Tried so hard to try and convince him to join the Derry cause, but he's a big dub. He's not interested. But these boys are ready to rock. There's another player there, Adam Ferrin, right? Nobody would know who he is, but he is unbelievable. He's going to be brilliant for Dublin next year. Whenever they need him, they just don't need him. That's the thing, and it's not like they'll have to get him up to speed or anything like that. They'll just pick him whenever they run out of players in that position, and then they'll throw him in. It's the same with McGuinness. He didn't play until out in Galway this year. Like, he starts centre half forward, he scores 2 points, and then the next game he scores 3 points. Sunday's playing the league final against Derry, and he's one of their best players. And now he's just back because James McCarthy's back. They just put him back into the subs bench, and once they need him again, they'll use him. And that's the thing. Like, if that was Derry with McGuinness, it'd be like, oh my God, this boy can't go anywhere. We need him for every single minute. And that's natural and that's okay. But for every other team apart from Dublin, they need their players to win the All-Ireland.
It's a thing as well. Galway won't be getting too overcarried with the result, because last year against Westmeath, the scoreline really did flatter them. They struggled in Mullingar for large periods, and of course, a lot of Galway people don't want to talk about that Armagh result from last year.
Yeah, like that, and that's my hope though. I mean, you're saying a lot of people hope that doesn't happen, but that's all I can depend on now, is Armagh beating Galway and then struggling over Westmeath again, and then Derry going and hopefully absolutely hammering Westmeath and running up a big scoreline. So, like, yeah, the thing about Westmeath, because I watched them against Armagh as well, and do you remember the weekend that everybody talked about Ross Common holding the ball for 6 minutes against Dublin? The same weekend, but it wasn't on TV. Westmeath held it for over 7 against Armagh. I think it was on GA Go, and they, like, no, it didn't really get picked up as much because it wasn't at Croke Park and it wasn't against Dublin. But like, this is the sort of thing that they'll probably bring in to this group now, because they couldn't have been drawn in a harder group again. God love them. Imagine that. Like, you go in against Tyrone, Armagh, and Galway one year, and then it's the same basically as next year, except it's Derry.
And Michael, it's just about finishing this group strongly for Galway.
Yeah, as I said earlier, you know, these things are difficult to kind of make hard and fast predictions about. Like, Galway go up to Mullingar the next day against Westmeath, the Maroon against the Maroon, and then it's Armagh in their final match. Who's going to come out of those things? Cheapers, I don't know. You know, Galway are in a good place at the moment, but these are not easy matches, you know, and it's a scrap, you know, it's a little bit of a scrap, and you have to wait and see how it all pans out. It's a bit like Tyson Fury and your man Usyk the other night, kind of, you know, put them in the ring, let them hit the japers out of each other, and then see what the referee said at the end of it, or the judges, you know. We have to wait and see, and that applies to the 4 groups here. You know, as I said, you can pretty much put some money on a Dub or a Kerry to come out of their groups, sure, you know, but outside of that, how is this going to play out? Back in the day, if you go back through the years, you could win about 3 All-Irelands in the amount of games that are played before you even get to a quarterfinal at this stage, you know. So, and it becomes more difficult. And this compact season, which I do not agree with, by the way, but this adds another dimension to the whole thing, because it puts so much more pressure on teams, turning around week after week, pretty much, and trying to stay focused, trying to stay like on the top of their form, if you will. But then, you know, that's what it is. That's where we're at the moment. And all we can do is sit back, fold our arms, and enjoy it.
That's it. And that's all we do have time for on today's podcast. A really enjoyable chat to have Conán and Michael on this week's podcast. Thanks a million, lads, for coming on.
You're more than welcome.